What's up, guys? Welcome to Andor Season 1, Episode 5. Let's conversationalize. What's up, guys? So this episode, in summary, did not very much. Like the last episode, we were getting things moving. We were doing some stuff was happening, and then we just come to this place in this episode where we just slow to a crawl, and it just wasn't fun to watch. So I'm not saying everything needs to be fun to watch, I'm just saying it needs to have at least some sort of intrigue, and honestly, I was finding myself quite bored for a large duration of this episode. I even debated whether even giving you guys the, from beginning to end run through of the episode, just because I feel like so little actually happens and so little is actually accomplished. We get to know a little bit more about each different character, but just a little bit though. And I mean, I guess some of it's insightful, but not enough to be like, hey, that's something. That's snazzy. So in short, this episode was essentially just a bunch of, it was almost, you could say, like an extended cut of the last one. Like all of the plot points set up in the last episode were continued like in subtle ways in this episode. But it's like a conglomeration of all of that, which makes me, of the opinion that this was not the best episode, because it did very much mirror the first two episodes of this show in the fact that it was so slow and it was so filler. Like we start off with the former Deputy Inspector Karn in his home, almost in tears, because you can tell he's just so distraught about losing his job, and he's talking to his mom about this uncle that he has, and this is continued in a later scene of the episode as well, this uncle that he has, and basically the conversation just entails that the mom wants him to have a future, but she wants to know that he has a plan for the future. And she doesn't really seem to have a lot of faith in him. Like, she doesn't really seem to be that proud of him, and that seems to be kind of weighing on Karn. So that, that little bit is interesting there. Also, we have the official introduction of cereal in the Star Wars universe. They look like Cocoa Puffs, but they're blue and some other color. And it's blue milk. You pour blue milk into this cereal, and I feel like there's a limit. It's kind of like the green milk in The Last Jedi, which, in full disclosure, I hate the sequels. I hate The Last Jedi vehemently, and so for various reasons, and so I try not to reference the sequels. But in this case, it seems appropriate because the green milk that was featured in The Last Jedi, it kind of had a similar feel to it, where it wasn't as weird in that same sense as it was in The Last Jedi, with this weird creature with these udders that squirted out this green milk. But it was weird in the same sense of like, what? Now we have cereal in Star Wars? Like, people are eating cereal and getting up in the morning eating cereal. It just, something about it feels off. It just feels too, I guess it's a similar problem that I've had with some of the other aesthetics chosen in the previous episodes, that it just feels too real world. I feel like they should, nix as much of that stuff as possible. They even use the measurements of meters later in the episode, which I think may have been already a thing in Star Wars, that they use meters in Star Wars. But I feel like there's, Star Wars is always so good at just coming up with different stuff on the fly. And so I feel like they could do the same. Because like in Star Wars, spice is drugs. Like, there aren't drugs, they're spice. You have milk, you have blue milk, and guns or blasters, and similar stuff like that. So I feel like you just should find more creativity, more words, and it's just, blue milk and cereal. That's interesting. Anyway, we move to Andor back at his pals, back on Aldhani, the planet featured in the last episode. And again, it's like, when you have the tension continuing from the ending of the last episode, and you're like, and again, like I even mentioned in my last review of the Andor episode, is that it was a weird place to end it. Because you literally just stopped on him eating some food and about to prepare to memorize a bunch of different stuff that he needed for the mission. But they were playing it like as if it was some big tense thing, like they had some music kind of swelling, and then there was an end. So you figured, or at least I figured, that the next episode would have the battle in it, would have the extraction, like they would commit the robbery in the next episode. I feel that's what they should have done. Because you have all the setup in episode 4, and they set it up really well. And so, like, they even going over the battle plan, like, hey, we got, there's this stuff that happens in the sky that's going to cover our escape, and we got all these plans, we got all these schematics, and we know exactly where all the stuff is, all the mechanics inside the base to be able to get the money out. Like, we are golden, we are good, we are great, let's do this. And here, again, like I said, slow to a crawl. More character exposition about what each character is in it for. And I feel like you could have kind of done that maybe in the earlier episode. You just made it a little longer. Or at least just shorten this one. Because, you could have merged this episode with the last one. Or even merged this episode with the second one. You just did not need a whole episode devoted to this character, this character, this character, this character has a thing, and this character has a thing. And some of it kind of feels just unnecessary. Like the Mon Mothma stuff in this episode, she has a daughter. Okay, I thought it was weird enough that she had a husband. Well, not weird, but, out of the blue, that's enough that she had a husband. But no, she has an actual, whole family. She has a daughter. I did not know that. And there's this whole conversation that goes down between the three of them, or not the three of them, really just the daughter and the mother, father sitting at the table with them. And it was kind of hard to follow, I wasn't really understanding what the daughter was trying to convey to Mon Mothma. She was like, you're just trying to show off, because Mon Mothma wanted to take her somewhere, I guess her class, because she planned to, and the dad is on the daughter's side. It was just it was a vague conversation. I needed more context. There was not a lot of meat to eat off the bone. I needed more context. But the bottom line is the daughter and the father, I think, maybe have some idea of the fact that Mon Mothma is kind of in on the rebellion. I could be totally wrong about that, but there was a line that the daughter said that made me go, she might have some knowledge of it. She was like, you just want to show off the fact that you're involved. Which I don't know how her driving the daughter to wherever they needed to go would have been. I don't understand. Again, that's what I was saying about needing more context. And then there's a later scene where Mon Mothma and her husband are going somewhere. I don't know where. I guess they're going to see some more friends. And that scene was very much like the Karn and his mother's scene in the last episode where he first goes back to her. And it was kind of like setting up these things just to continue in the next episode kind of just feels like you should complete something in this episode. And stuff was set up in the last one, but nothing was completed in this one. And I honestly had that fear before I watched this episode. I kind of had this worry that, I knew the robbery needed to take place in this episode. I knew that needed to happen in this one. But I did have this fear that they would just drag it out too long, slow everything down to where the robbery might not even take place in this episode, and it'll be next one. We're just going to spend every minute of every moment of the episode just, watching this person walk over here and talk about this person and talk about this person and talk about talking to this person while they're talking to someone else if they're talking with them that they're not talking to. There you go. Moving on. And so I had that worry. And unfortunately my fears were realized. And so all that tension that was built up in the last episode, we were like, hey, yeah, we're going to go rob the place, it's going to be a good time, was kind of just wah, wah, wah. In this one, nothing was escalated. The ISB girl from the last one is still kind of on the scavenger hunt for rebels. You can tell that she's kind of on their trail. Speaking of which, there were a few lines in this episode that I thought were pretty good. The first one was when Skeen, the character Skeen, was talking to Andor, when Andor was noticing his tattoos and naming all of them, Andor knew what they were, what Skeen's tattoos were. And then Skeen started talking about the Empire, and he said, the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. And it took me a while, but I was like, oh, I get it. The metaphor is essentially the oppressor can forget who they oppressed, but the person who was oppressed can never forget, which is why he later says, so now we'll do the chopping. So Skeen's out for revenge, and it's revealed later in the episode that he's out for revenge because his brother was a farmer, and the Empire came and flooded his farmland. I forget if it was because they wanted it or something like that, but they flooded his farmland, and it was just too much for the brother. He just couldn't handle the fact that they flooded his land, so he drowned himself. Which that alone is kind of something you don't really hear often in Star Wars, somebody taking their own life in really any kind of way. But that kind of shows you the more grittier feel they're going for this episode. Also, they're really trying to make even the bad guys, have some kind of arc or deeper emotions to them than just surface level, I'm a bad guy, or I'm an Imperial. Like many of the Imperials beforehand have just been very, surface level, I'm a bad guy. I'm an Imperial. And I honestly don't... Like, Tarkin is a good example for this kind of character. He is a surface-level bad guy. He doesn't have a lot of depth. He is, completely devoted to the Empire. He truly believes that the Empire is the security for the galaxy. But other than that, it's just kind of... at least in The New Hope, he's been given more depth over time, but in The New Hope, he's been very much just, I'm a bad guy. And I think that's okay. I think so long as you have a presence, be a bad guy. In some cases. I do prefer more depth to characters in other cases. But in some cases, I'm just like, you don't need a ton of depth. It's okay to just be evil sometimes. As long as you do it right. But they're trying to give each bad guy in this one some deeper emotion. Like, the ISB girl is talking to her assistant dude. The assistant guy is motivating her and kind of like... Apparently, he seems to be genuinely her friend, or at least he regards her as a friend. And he's encouraging her to keep searching for the rebels. And he's pointed out how random the different attacks and thefts have been across the galaxy to make her think that there is a larger rebellion going on. And he says, he name drops Kessel, Fondor, and Jakku. Now, of course, Jakku is the junk planet featured in Force Awakens. Kessel is, of course, the place where the famous Kessel Run took place. The Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, as Han Solo mentions in A New Hope. That was featured in Solo's Star Wars story. We all saw it. Fondor was actually mentioned in the last episode. Luthen's ship was a ship that was made on Fondor. And in Star Wars, Fondor is a planet that is known for its massive shipyards. And I believe it either helped create or created a similar type of Star Destroyer to the Executor, Darth Vader's flagship in The Empire Strikes Back. I believe the Fondor shipyards actually helped produce that Star Destroyer, which is pretty cool. But yes, all three of those planets get name dropped. But there's a line that the assistant guy says. He says it's too random to be random, which essentially means it's so random and scatterbrained, all these different attacks, that it has to be purposeful on the part of the rebels to make it look that way, as to not draw attention from the larger Empire, to make the Empire think that, oh, these are too random, they're just one's over here, one's over there, they're not connected, there's no way they're connected. But these ISB guys, or at least these two, the girl and guy, see through that. They kind of see through the randomness. So it's too random to be random, and I actually really enjoyed that line. Also, a little bit more information revealed about a character, Lieutenant Gorn, the character introduced in the last episode, who's like undercover as an Imperial to get information for the rebels on Aldhani with Andor. He apparently was actually a part of the Empire and was in line for a promotion when he fell in love with one of the local women, and he lost the woman and the promotion in that whole situation. So that kind of made him lose his taste for the Empire and want to become a rebel. At least as Vel puts it. And there was a line that she said where she was like, we all have our own rebellion. So there were definitely some lines in this episode that I was like, hey, that's good writing, that's well written. Tidbits of information. We get a little bit more about Nimic, the younger British boy. I say boy, he's a man, but you could call him a boy, I guess. We learn he's totally in it for the cause. And you could kind of tell that in the last episode. he has all these ideals about oppression, how the Empire tries to deceive the people into kind of oppressing themselves in a way. And there was a lot of stuff he was saying that I was like, that has some truth to it. That definitely has some truth to it. I think that has been put on display in our world without people knowing it a lot of the time. There's one line where he essentially says the means of which the Empire uses to take things away from people and take the people's freedom away, they do it so fast that the people don't even notice, and they start becoming compliant with it. That's an interesting idea, because I feel like that is something that has happened in the real world in recent times. Just slowly take this away, take this away, take this away, put this in, take this away, and before you know it, freedom is gone. It's interesting that they brought that up in this episode. I was kind of surprised, but they did. He even mentions the Imperial thought machine, their tactics to get people to forget their freedom. He talks about, them trying to push people to forget all these different things until they push them to forget their freedom. And again, all of those different ideals are very interesting and true, unfortunately, in our real world. And it makes sense that the Empire would do something like that. They're just the kind of organization to do something like that, especially with all the conspiracies that went down with Palpatine as Chancellor in the prequels. If you watch Clone Wars, you see all the different things the gears he turned and manipulated everyone in all these little ways to eventually just turn everything on its head. And in a way, the Empire kind of still does that to the wider galaxy. They make you think one thing, but then they do another. That's even touched on a slight bit in Rebels. They're not as on-the-nose oppression. So, very interesting ideas. There's also a funny moment where Nemik offers Andor some milk right before he explains all that stuff to him. Apparently it's called Dre milk. And he's like, it may make you question your existence for a few days. And I thought that was a funny line, because apparently it looked like it tasted so terrible, I assume it's the Star Wars equivalent of yak milk. I guess apologies to anybody who likes yak milk, but everything I've heard of it, it's not great. Or maybe real milk straight from the cow's udder. Could be the Star Wars equivalent of that as well. Heck, at this point, anything could happen. We've got blue milk and cereal with Star Wars Cocoa Puffs. What I was mentioning about the bad guys is there's even a moment where Gorn, the undercover Imperial, is talking to two of his officers, and he's like, this thing on the wall should have been painted yesterday, or it should have been painted by now, and you guys will have to dispatch some people to paint it tomorrow night. And tomorrow night for them would have been when the Eye in the Sky took place, if you will, that big space happening. And the two officers are even like, if we could speak plainly, nobody would really want to miss that. That's even an interesting idea. We've never really seen Imperials care about that kind of thing before. But even just those little bits of conversation kind of reveal, they really are trying to pull the evil layers off some of these Imperials and give them a little bit more character than just do this, do that, I'm a bad guy. And again, I really don't care either way. I will say I might be one of those rare people who's kind of on the side of it's not really necessary that you have these scenes. They're interesting. They do provide intrigue, but not so much to the point of devoting a whole scene to it. Devoting a whole scene to these guys want to talk about this, and this person feels this way about things. Sometimes you just want your bad guys to be bad guys. Especially when it comes to Imperials, because they've never, ever had more layers to them. And it was never really necessary. Callus in Rebels was one of the only ones that had you discovered actually, there is a little bit more to him than just I'm a bad guy. And, again, when you do it right, you do it right. But other times, if you just got these two dudes or these one guy or whoever, or these random characters, we're going to pull back the layers on them. It just kind of feels like you're just wasting time from time that could be spent, moving the actual plot forward. Also, quick side note, there's a funny space goat in this episode that you can see. I don't know if it's a goat or a yak or what, but it's a very interesting looking creature. It's got like 4 horns. It might be real because I have seen goats like that with like multiple horns. But yeah, I've heard of space ghost, but never space goat. Moving on, there's a moment where I noticed the ISB girl, who's kind of tracking down the rebellion, was taking some pills, and I didn't know if that was meant to allude to something, that she maybe needed to take medicine. She might have like a problem that the writers might be using to kind of make you feel a little bit more sympathy for her. Maybe that's one of the reasons she feels so strongly about tracking down these rebels, is she wants to strive to do one last great thing. Maybe she has a terminal illness that not many people know about, that she's kind of taking pills for. That could be an interesting idea if they went down that road. Main things that kind of move the character plots forward is Skeen he clearly has not trusted Andor this whole time. And he finally makes a move on Andor and takes away his Kyber necklace. He shows it to everybody. He's like, I knew it. I knew he was holding out on us. This is worth at least 30,000 credits. And he calls it Sky Kyber, similar to how Luthen called it Sky Stone. And Vel just says to him, just calm down. Everybody calm down. It's fine. We don't need to worry about this. And then Cassian just flat out says, I've been paid for this job. Like before he was like, I was told I could help, that's why I'm here. But now he just admits, like, I'm just doing this for the money. And he also admits that if he wasn't getting paid, he wouldn't be there because he felt it was a suicide mission. He felt it like that from the beginning. As soon as she told him, hey, we're going to take on a garrison. But yeah, he's just in it for the money. Obviously the other members don't really take kindly to that. But they don't rag him super hard for it. And it's even later when Skeen reveals that information about his brother to Andor and says that's as close as an apology that he'll get to for Andor, and Andor's like, well, that's enough. So I did like that moment between them. But yeah, at the end, they have like this torch on fire, and it's like meant to be a signal to the undercover Imperial / true rebel guy, Gorn, to say, hey, we're about to execute the plan. And you get one last scene. It's the only scene with Luthen in the episode. You get one last scene where Luthen is on this transmitter waiting for any transmissions to come in. I don't know if he's hoping for any transmissions to come in. I think he's just there because he is so concerned, which is apparently not entirely normal, but he is so concerned about this mission that Andor is about to embark on, this robbery. Even his assistant's like, I don't like seeing you nervous. And he said that he wasn't careful enough when he extracted Andor from Ferrix, the planet that all the stuff went down on in the first 3 episodes. And they also mentioned that the Empire might be able to trace Vel back to him, which is interesting. I don't know if there probably is a deeper history there. Also, Vel and Cinta seem to have, like, they go off in the end. They make the character named Tamara in charge. And so I don't really know what they've got going on. They seemed like kind of the whole episode to have this thing that like only they know between the two of them. Or they're in cahoots about something. I don't know what. They may be Imperial spies. Just a thought. I had that thought at some point. I was like, is Vel maybe like a traitor? Is that what this is? Maybe like she's led them all here just to die? Could be an interesting idea. Don't really know. We'll see. I'm sorry for the more messy nature of this video. I really just did not feel it was necessary to go through every scene from beginning to end. This person talked to this person, talked to this person, talked to this person, talked. It was just main highlights that I saw and noticed throughout the episode that I was like, hey, that's kind of interesting, hey, that's kind of interesting, hey, that's kind of interesting. So please forgive me. I just didn't want to go through it all like that. Also, we get a better view of the holocrons. I didn't mention that in the last video, but there are some holocrons in Luthen's back room, and we get to see him standing right beside the shelf that they're on. And they're very large holocrons. One's a Jedi and one's a Sith. So those are interesting. He seems to have this interest in the Force, and anybody who has an interest in the Force is all right in my book. But I think the main takeaway from this episode, we have learned something. The less Luthen is in an episode, the episode will not be as good. The worse the episode will be. Because Luthen wasn't even in episode 1. That was a meh episode. Luthen was barely in episode 2. That was definitely a meh episode. Luthen had some prominence in episode 3. Pretty decent episode. Luthen was really prominent in episode 4, and I was like, yeah, this is a great episode. That is still by far the best of the 5 that they've released so far. And Luthen was only in one scene in this episode, so quality has dwindled. I love Stellan Skarsgård's character. I love Luthen. He's a very interesting character to me, and the less you have him on screen, the less interested I'm probably going to be in the show. As good of a character as Andor is, he's not as interesting. He's not an interesting enough character to carry this entire show. Like, if you have your moments without Luthen, there's really not any other character that I'm like, hey, I wonder what that person's doing. I guess other than Andor, because he is the main character, and we do know him from Rogue One. But even then, and even in those scenes, he's just kind of talking to some people, being grouchy. Not a lot's going on there. He's very protective of his things. And I think the fact that he really isn't carrying his own show is on full display. So much other stuff is going on with the Mon Mothma and Luthen and Rebel and Imperial, and all sorts of different stuff is going on to help carry the show further, to a point where Andor is kind of just, like, the character of Cassian Andor is kind of just the catalyst to explore the birth of the rebellion and the birth of all the different journeys people embarked on to make the rebellion happen, and how the Empire kind of started catching on over the years. But it really does seem like that to me. It really does seem like they just kind of chose Cassian Andor as this character to use to explore all that other stuff in live action. Because it is true that even though we saw a lot of the birth of the rebellion in Rebels, we didn't really see the heart of it. We didn't see the political side of things like they're exploring with Mon Mothma. And I really do wish they would get more to, like, the political thriller side. Because last episode we had a talk with her husband about the fact that he doesn't like her, apparently. He really doesn't seem to like her at all. It's a very dysfunctional family, Mon Mothma's is. And in this episode we get more dysfunctional family. And that's not nearly as interesting as getting into political thriller stuff. Like, they kind of did it a little bit in the last episode where she's talking to Luthen about the inner circle. Like, I want to see more of that. I want to see what's going on there. Because one of the things that intrigued me most about the prospect of the show and the trailers was the political thriller aspect of it. Like, Mon Mothma's being watched by all these people, and she's got to be careful, and she's got to talk to this person to try to figure out, like, hey, do you want to be in the circle, or are you an Imperial? Do you actually support the Empire? Like, all that stuff is the meat. But we just keep getting dysfunctional family. I don't want dysfunctional family. I want meat. I want political thriller. And I need more action. I mean, call me a hater of character development, which I'm definitely not, but there's a difference between character development and lingering, and this episode was just a bunch of lingering. We should have gotten the robbery, we should have gotten the big action sequence in this episode. And when you are a Star Wars product, and I know that a bunch of people want to do different things, but when you are a Star Wars product, you are kind of expected to have this certain amount of action in, I'm not saying even in each episode, but just in some of them. Like, there was one very, very small action sequence in the first episode. There were no action sequences in the second episode. There was the major action sequences, the climax of the third episode, and there were no action sequences in the fourth episode or this episode. So I feel like I got the need for some more action in my life from Andor. But yes, that is pretty much the review of episode 5. Not a lot to delve into here. Some interesting ideas, some well-written lines, but no meat. It just kind of feels devoid of some life at this point, and devoid of momentum. I think devoid of a momentum is the best way to put it. We had a good thing going with the ending of episode 4, but when you think about it, my fears were realized in the sense of ending of episode 4. They're still planning stuff. Andor and his crew are still planning on how to attack the base. Luthen is putting up his facade of being a rare antiquities dealer. Mon Mothma is having dysfunctional family issues. ISB girl is searching out for rebel stuff. Karn is with his mom. This episode, Karn is with his mom. ISB surfing for rebel stuff. Andor and his crew are still planning on how to take the base. Luthen is still keeping up the facade of being an antiquities dealer. We pretty much got nowhere. that's my review of episode 5. Let me know what you guys thought about it down in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the bell for notifications. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to subscribe. Thank you guys very much for watching. May the Lord be with you. May the Force be with you. And have a very blessed day. Goodbye. That's a wrap.